All right, recording in progress. As always, if you can join us on camera, please do. We love to see all your beautiful faces as we're talking at you. And we are on my favorite page, page 27. You got to see me really get whipped up into a frenzy last week as I talked through this. So what we thought we would do is I'm going to reread this just critical paragraph that describes our solution, what it looks like. It's so important to understand this and be able to talk to people that we're working with about it. And then maybe David will just sort of color it in a little bit more again, so that we have some good continuity as we get into the final paragraph on this page. So page 27, just reminding everybody for context where we are. We're in the story with Roland Hazard, who had worked with Dr. Jung, and Dr. Jung had told him he was going to die, basically, death sentence. He's never seen anybody with alcoholism as bad as Roland's get better. And he asked the doctor, well, is there no exception? And this is where we'll pick it up. So he said to the doctor, well, I'll back it up. It's a couple more sentences. Well, here's what the doctor told him, why he couldn't stop drinking. The doctor said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, is there no exception? Yes, replied the doctor, there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding force of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, they've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I've never been successful with an alcoholic, your description.
And do you want me to go over the definitions?
Do them, yeah. And then,
okay.
Yeah, let's do them again.
So the first definition I have is vital, which is described as essential or life supporting. The second one is phenomena, which is defined as unusual, unaccountable, or extraordinary events. And then displacements, which is defined as being changed or replaced. So in the sentences, I'll reread these for you. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called essential life-supporting spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are unusual, unaccountable, or extraordinary events. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional changes and rearrangements.
Thank you, Sam. Go ahead, David. Otherwise, I'm just going to cover it all again. Can't help myself.
Okay. Briefly, I'll just run through this. So where David started out with on page 27, in the second paragraph, let's just go to the last sentence in there, just because this describes an emotion, a feeling, a place of existence for the real alcoholic at the end of his rope. So our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. My note there is hopelessness. That has got to be the end. I'm done digging the ditch. I'm done. The gates of hell clang shut on me. I'm done. I mean, this is bad news, right? This is horrible news. And then as we go through the next paragraph, the fourth paragraph actually is page 27, fourth paragraph. We're talking about what Dr. Jung is calling a vital spiritual experience. So Silkworth called it an entire psychic change. They mean the exact same thing. They mean the exact same thing. Two different doctors telling two different patients that they must have this change. And this is what it is. It is radical change, matter of fact. It's not just change. It is a radical change. So as we get into the changes that David described there as he was reading the thing, ideas. My ideas are my thinking. And then my emotions are my feelings. And then my attitudes, that's my beliefs. All these things need to change. We were talking about this before the meeting, which it says, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, were suddenly cast one aside, and completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. This must happen for me. This must happen for me. This is the result of working these steps. This is about having a vital experience. We know the directions in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous here is the directions to have this happen. Also, no human power can produce this for me. No meetings, no sponsor, not mama, no mom and dad. None of those things are going to tried it, right? None of those things ever worked. This is about a power greater than myself. This is touching on pages in the steps of hopelessness in 1, and then we're talking about the rest of the work here in the Big Book and the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous. And as we go down to the bottom of the page there, so what I also need to know about my feelings are that when my thinking changes, my feelings change. And without this work, I'm trapped in my feelings. You guys remember that? I'm trapped in my feelings when I'm in this in the depths of alcoholism. In untreated alcoholism, I'm in the depths of my feelings. And without this work, I'm trapped in those emotions. Sadness is just a God-given emotion today. It just does not dominate me anymore. It doesn't dominate my feelings. It's okay to be sad. Absolutely. It's a God-given emotion. But I just don't let it dominate me any longer here. This is about having that vital spiritual experience. And Sam gave us a definition. Another definition for vital is a success or continued existence of something. If I'm going to live, I must have this. Because earlier in the page, remember in the second paragraph, it talked about you have a mind of a chronic alcoholic. Chronic is persisting, constantly, reoccurring. It's not going to get better. It always gets worse.
All right. I'm feeling the pull, but
Go.
I'm going to say we're going to move on. So here's what we're going to do. Actually, we decided this last week. I should have reminded Sam for definitions. We got to go to Appendix 2, spiritual experience. So let's jump to the back of the book, page 567. Second time we're being referred there. The next time Bill says it, it's almost like he's pleading. Please see. All right, are we all there? 567. Appendix 2, spiritual experience. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which, upon careful reading, shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. So, just to be clear here, a little bit of old-timey language, right? What he's saying, okay, so we have a couple different expressions, or euphemisms is the word that I use a lot, spiritual experience and spiritual awakening. And my understanding a little bit of the history of how Bill actually differentiated among these terms is he described what event that he had, his sort of thunderbolt moment, as a spiritual experience, kind of like a singular event, where spiritual awakening is this appendix is going to talk about is a little bit more of a gradual sort of journey, right? And so the key phrase here, though, is that what happens to us, what we just read about on page 27, where our thinking changes, our feeling changes, our attitudes change, our beliefs, when the way I think, the way I feel, and the way I react changes, it results in a personality change that is insufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. So again, fancy phrase that says, when everything inside of me gets better, I turn into a new person. And all of a sudden, I don't have those beliefs, those prejudices rotting in my belly. I don't have all that hate in my heart. And I don't have all that tactical evil in my brain. I'm going to have a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. But how it happens to us can happen in many different ways. We don't all experience this in the same fashion.
I do have definitions from, I think, taking
Perfect.
the steps when we did this.
Awesome.
I have the definition of spiritual inexperience. And this is from the Webster Student Dictionary from 1938. And this is their definition of it. Spiritual is defined as of or belonging to man's spirit or soul, not bodily, material, or carnal. And experience is defined as knowledge or special skill resulting from continuance in a particular study or work.
So, did you read the second paragraph? The only reason I asked that question because I wasn't paying attention, but I had to get
Thanks,
another
David.
book out. No, I had to get a different book out because I have the study edition, two of them here going at the same time, but they don't have that in here, so I had to
I
get
did the first
my,
paragraph only.
Okay, first paragraph. So only thing I'm going to really ask the fellowship here to do, if they would, is look for the word change here, and I'll point it out in every paragraph because he uses change a lot, but he also uses other words that mean change. So that's the only thing I really wanted to address there.
Yeah. Carry this theme, personality change. So moving on. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous.
I do have some definitions here too. I have erroneous and upheavals. Erroneous is, the synonym for that is incorrect. And then upheavals is described as change. So, in the sentences, yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular changes. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is incorrect.
So I said last week when I read page 27 for the first time, I didn't do it tonight in the interest of plowing along, but where the doctor said ideas, emotions, and attitudes were once the guiding force of lives, and these men are suddenly cast to one side. I said, don't even worry about suddenly. And every time David and I do our first step talk, I always make the same comment. And that's the crux of what this spiritual experience appendix is about. As you see, as we continue to read, it's about change, as David brought up, and it's about don't feel like, unless you have God appear to you in an instant, that you didn't get better or you're not getting better. What this is going to take great pains to say is that God comes to most of us slowly, gradually. Okay. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook.
I have the definition of revolutionary here, which is defined as completion of a reoccurring cycle, change. So not only is Bill using the word change, I think it's 6 times in here, but he's also using different words to describe the change. And then I also had consciousness, which a synonym for that, which is easily described as awareness. So God awareness. That's all I got.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, so in that paragraph, so we're talking about all these revolutionary changes, but they're talking about when the first few chapters of this book that we've already studied, and there's no way that I would miss a ton of them, so I'm not even going to try to point out all of them. I'm just going to point out a couple of them that stand out to me. Like if I was going to go back to Bill's story on page 13, when he's lying in the hospital bed, and in that page of 13, the whole thing is describing the 12 steps. Bill's going through the 12 steps, and some of the things he's having experience with the steps already in his life is depletion of ego. That is a revolutionary change, and that's something that needs to be taking place in my life all day long. And that's where the 10th step comes in. Having recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body, I need my ego to be deflated all day long, standing at the turning point. And he talk about these senses that come in and his experience with that. I mean, I could touch on so many different things, even, page 17 of our book, at the bottom of the page where they talk about this tremendous fact for every one of us is that we discovered a common solution. That's change. I mean, I didn't know there was a common solution for us, guys. I really did not know that. I heard just stop drinking. Abstinence was the only solution I knew of, but I couldn't do that on my own power. So, I mean, it's just too many things for me to go through, and I don't want, do it on your own. That's why this is a big book, and why this big book is a textbook and meant to be studied. So you can have your own experience with those things. The last thing I would point out in that page is after the quotations is followed at once by a vast change in feelings and outlook. That's a spiritual experience. That vast change, like I didn't do this. No human power did this to me. About my feelings, remember we just read about that on page 27, how these things were suddenly cast to one aside, and my outlook upon life. My outlook upon life is just, dude, I know people say, you first come in, you're on a pink cloud. Call it a pink cloud, call it what do you want to call it. I call it grace. I call it God's grace. And I just celebrated 24 years of continuous sobriety on Monday. And by the grace of God, you guys people here, that applause should be for God. You guys, I'm telling you right now.
We are.
Right. Thank you. This vast change in feelings and outlooks. But this is going to be work to keep that, guys. I have a responsibility in this thing. It's not God's job to wave a wand. I could tell you story after story after story after story of how God has showed up. What's my job to do that? It's to call on him. Get unblocked and call on God and invite him in. I don't believe God's an intruder. I do believe that I am responsible for the work out of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous here. So that's happened in my life. I know it's happened to millions of others. Let's continue trudging this road of happy destiny.
So a couple things just to underscore. So revolutionary changes, like Sam was describing, are like super changes. Think about the word revolutionary. What's the root of it? Revolution. We know what a revolution is. We all studied this in school, right? The people rise up and they overthrow the government. It's a revolution. It's a massive change. So this is like a massive change. And then Bill's, again, he's really sort of warming up to this point that you guys may have misunderstood what I was trying to communicate. It was not our intention to create an impression that you had to have this, again, thunderbolt moment. And so from reading the book, that's what they concluded. And if you read Bill's story, you're like, well, I didn't have what Bill had, right? And there was other people like, AA number 3, Bill Dotson, he got out of his bed, never drank again. You're like, well, I didn't feel instantly better, right? And he's going to go on to say, this is not everybody's experience, right? We do eventually get, and David was taking great pains to say this vast change in feeling and outlook, but no one should feel bad if you don't have it in the snap of the fingers, which, by the way, guess who wants to be better in the snap of a finger? 100% of us, because we love instant gratification. Why would I do the work if I could just have something handed to me? Thank God that is not how recovery works. And I have to work for it and play the two-man game with God, the way that David was just talking about. God does not do for me when I'm sitting on my couch in the basement feeling sorry for myself. It does not work that way in my experience. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, so these, very quick ones, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life. I got to reread that. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves.
So again, we got a lot of words here that Bill is using, and they all relate to change. So among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations is a change, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James called the educational varieties. And he explains exactly what the educational one is. It's not the one that Bill had, it's the one that I had and continue to have. That is important to remember, to continue to have this. I've had many and many, I can't even count them. As long as I stay on the beam, as long as I stay connected to God throughout my day. See, God is closer to my breath. I don't have to take a number when I call upon God. Get in line, take a number, I'll get to you when I get to you. It's not like that for me. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. That's change. Other people recognize things in me before I recognize it. And I point it out to my sponsees. I do. I've always had kind of old, grouchy sponsors, not the one I have now. Sometimes he is.
Yeah,
Don't tell him. Don't tell him. He's grouchy. He is kind of. But so they would never say anything about any of the change other than the things that I was doing incorrectly. Like I used to use profanity in meetings. I try not to do that any longer. There's no point in doing that. I changed all those things. And then that's something I have power over too, by the way. I do have power over that. And then he says he finally realizes he has undergone profound alteration in his reaction to life. David read that twice. Why? Because it is so important that this happens for me. My whole life looks 180 degrees different. Like I pinch myself every day, guys. I get up at 2 a.m. in the morning here in the States to go to work. I get to go to work. I own my own business. I'm very successful. But it's not about that because my career is parallel with everything I learned in the service portion of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's about servicing my customers. It's about how can I best serve you? How can I best do that? It's always about that. See, because there's a couple things I got to talk about. My sobriety is not my sobriety; it's God's. So how am I going to take care of it? For me, I got to take care of it by doing this work in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. My money's not my money; He just entrusts me with it, and I try to do the best job that I can with it. My wife is not even my wife. She's a child of God. I've got to treat my wife the way that God would want me to treat my wife and my children and every human being I come in contact with today. I am responsible for who I am today. But the bottom line is all these things, all these changes in my life and people seeing these changes in me allowed me to be a different person. The guy maybe possibly that I was supposed to be all along. But because of my untreated alcoholism, I wasn't that person. Today I get to be that. So I'm always aware, always at the turning point about a power greater than myself in my life today, and I can call on that power anytime I want.
So let's key on this sentence a little bit more. He finally realized that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life. Otherwise said, when presented with the circumstances of life that God puts in front of me, I think about them differently, I feel about them differently, and I react to them differently. We haven't got to the bedevilments yet. We'll get to that in a little while on page 52, but I gotta break there for a minute and I'm gonna steal, and David, you might need to circle back in here. One of the things that David always talks about whenever we're covering the bedevilments that we do, when we talk about the spiritual malady. So if you're not familiar with them, on page 52, second paragraph starting in the second sentence, this is a description, not the only description, but of what a description it looks like to be spiritually ill, to have an unmanageable life. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. So whenever we're taking newcomers through the bedevilments like this and we explain it and, give some scenarios, we get a lot of nodding heads. As we're culminating, including this, David always asks, he prefaces it by saying, don't answer this because they're going to say the wrong thing. Well, what do all of these things have in common? I mean, what are these things, David? You want to tell us what all these things have in common?
None of them are external. They're all internal. Every one of them. See, it has nothing to do, and I'll just go briefly. It has nothing to do with the way I was brought up, who my mom and dad were, the color of my skin, my sexual orientation. There's nothing to do with that. These are all internal things. These all need to change and have changed because it relates exactly to what David's point is here with this spiritual experience. And the word profound, like how many things that we talk about, I had a lot of profound things happen in my life. I was adopted at birth. That's a profound effect on myself, right? When I found out about it. My parents got divorced. My adopted parents when I was 14. It had a profound effect. Alcoholics Anonymous had a profound effect on my life when I recovered. Like, oh my gosh, to a degree where it started affecting everybody I come in contact with. This is not just for me. This is for everybody I get to come, all of God's children. All God's children.
When I get spiritually fit, due to having a spiritual experience or a spiritual awakening, as we're reading about in Appendix 2, and I get this profound alteration in my reaction to life, then all of a sudden, I'm either not in these bedevilments, or at least they're significantly dulled down and hopefully on the way to generally being eliminated. Why? Because I'm reacting to life differently. Was the problem in my personal relationship with my wife? Was my wife the problem? Or was it my reaction to my wife? Was it how I was thinking, feeling, or the attitude I carried about her? Right? Was I having trouble controlling my emotional natures? Well, maybe the way that I thought and felt and reacted to a situation where I blew up was unreasonable. Go through all these bedevilments. It is my reaction to life, through my thoughts, my feelings, and my attitudes that are causing me to be stuck in these bedevilments, right? And this is why I'm sinking into nothing. All right, continuing on 568. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it a God consciousness.
Where did Sam go? Is she there?
Sam, why is she still here? Oh, there she is. Oh, yeah, you moved. Okay, nothing in that one. Go ahead, David.
God consciousness. We're talking about step 11 there. That's what this guy's step 11 is for me. Awareness of this power. Like, see, all my life I've been asleep, dreaming I've been awake. Now I'm awake to this power in my life today. This is what step 11. This is a discipline. I do not miss my evening review. I try to do my 10-step all day long because that's what I'm doing all day long. I'm staying at the turning point. So the 10-step is for that reason. But then if I miss something, I get to look at that. And then I'm not taking all that garbage into the next day if it arrives. And then I ask God in the 11th step what to be divorced from. So there's a disciplines. Like I'm so disciplined in this work here today. Why? It's one simple answer. Because it just works. It has changed, it's revolutionized my life. I'm pretty sure we had a lot of people over the house last night. Paige is in town. Yay, Paige. There she is over there. We had a little dinner at my house for everybody. And I'm pretty sure if you ask my wife, she enjoyed herself as much as anyone. She's not one of us, right? Mm. And it's because that we have a loving, caring, thoughtful relationship. We had to work on it, sure. But I invite God into all that all the time, because I have a conscious contact with God. Go ahead, David.
So the essence of spiritual experience, or more religious members call it a God consciousness. And David referred to, of course, step 11. And when we get there many, many moons from now, we're going to see some of these promises that happen as the result of continued prayer and meditation. We're often surprised how the right answers come after we have tried this for a while. And most notably, what used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind, right? I am aware, and it becomes ingrained and connected and threaded together my relationship with God. And when I stay close to him, he helps me with those thoughts and feelings and attitudes. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover. Any alcoholic, if honest, can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. So there's a promise there with a major condition. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. Nothing saying, okay. Go ahead, David.
I just want to jump back just to one word that I breezed over in that paragraph prior. So most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. Let me give you the definition of essence because it's so important here. It says indispensable quality of something. It says especially something abstract that determines its character. So this is something that I get to have from a power greater than myself as a direct result of these steps. And it changes me internally, which affects everything externally. So most emphatically, the next paragraph, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honesty, and how it works, we read it up most of the meetings we go to, and capable of being honest with myself, then, dude, when I first came in, I wasn't capable of being honest. I just flat out was. But today I can be honest with when I got to a place where I could see to my innermost self I was a real alcoholic, that was the first time I was really honest in a very long time. And it says, facing these problems in the light of our experience can recover. Facing my problems is I got to find out what my problem is that I have this drink problem, this craving that I break out in. And then once I stop and I can't stay stopped, it's because without my permission, without my consent, I have this obsession in the mind and I pick up a drink anyways or a drug. But the greater part of this is the spiritual malady for me. And David just read the bedevilments. I think that's a great description of what my life looks in the second half of the first step, my unmanageability. So we define what the problem is in the first step. And the next, David does this every time we go to treatment centers and talk to people. We go there a couple of times a month. Is the next 10 steps gets us to the 12th step, which is our problem, is our solution step, right? Having had a spiritual awakening is a direct result of these steps. That's what I get to have. That is a promise that he came through. Then I got to carry this message to the alcoholic who still suffers. So that is the charge that I get made here too. I got to do that work there too. And then I got to practice these principles in all my affairs. And that's the condition that I have to try to live up to. I got to try to practice these principles in all my affairs. The only thing that's going to defeat me here is he can only be defeated by an attitude. This is about, again, go back to page 27 that we just read. All these things need to change. I need to stay connected to God if I'm intolerant or belligerent denial. That's it. It's black and white on the page.
Yeah, I mean, I think David said it all there. So all I'm going to do is repeat him, but I'm going to do it a little bit real quickly. Just, it was what a wonderful promise here. We take somebody through the book, we got to give them the reality, the death sentence that this illness can be for sure. But this book is littered liberally with all these promises that we can get better. Any alcoholic capable of being honest, which is hard at the beginning, like David pointed out, but we can learn honesty. And if we do it all, if we're thorough, right? Nothing counts but thoroughness and honesty. Any alcoholic, any addict, any troubled person can get better, provided he does not close his mind to spiritual concepts. Can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance. I don't know if you have intolerance, Sam. I know we've probably done it before. No, okay, maybe we can get it later. Or belligerent denial. You know what belligerent denial is? So denial's like, nah, I'm not into that. Belligerent denial is like, F you, I'm not into that, right? Belligerent is like angry, it's embittered, embattled. When you get into a fight, you're belligerent with someone, you're angry, you're aggressive. Here's another promise. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. So nobody has to get hung up on these things. This is another great idea to relate to someone. We're taking them through the work. You don't have to get hung up on the spirituality, dude. Are you willing to do the work? Can you be honest? Can you figure out how to be honest, and I'm going to help you? And can you be open-minded? And once we get into We Agnostics, like, it's a great chapter, and it's just filled with all these little kernels and nuggets that are intended to just pull us along a little bit. Be like, hey, man, just be willing to let go of some of those prejudices. Hey, man, just be willing to believe that that there's a possibility and you're going to get better. And that's what this is really saying here in brief. Dude, don't worry about whether there's a God or not a God, or what he looks like, or where he's at, or how he's going to interact in your life. He's going to become a working part of your mind. Just give it a shot. Just be willing to go with the program. See what happens.
I don't
Yeah,
have.
I'm sorry,
I
Sam,
don't
please
have
go.
Sorry. I don't have a good definition for intolerant, but I do have indispensable, which I thought was important to define. Indispensable is defined as impossible to do without, absolutely necessary. So in the sentence, willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are impossible to do without.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, so when we're talking about this attitude change, right? So we talked about attitude in page 27 at the top of the page. It talked about that it's certain simple attitude, and that certain simple attitude has to be open-mindedness. So if my mind snaps shut and I become intolerant and belligerent against all in denial of these things, and I can't be taught any longer, I'm going to drink again on my own power. That's simple. Or make the supreme sacrifice. I mean, that happens also. The promise that David talks about in the next paragraph, we find that no one need have difficulty. No one. And sometimes you hear this in meetings. Sometimes maybe you have or haven't. That this part of the program is spiritual. No, I don't think so. I think the whole program is spiritual in nature. I think the whole thing is spiritual in nature. From the time I walk in the front door of that church or sit here in front of my thing, I feel the spiritual connection. That's for me. That's what I feel. So I think this whole thing is spiritual. That is the unity part. And the steps are definitely spiritual in nature because anyone can get sober. It's even describing that here for us. We can read, it says, are the essentials of recovery. And then in service, I have made so many friends because of service when my triangle got filled out completely. Willingness. Throughout the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, will you see willingness, and what we need to pray for willingness. Willingness to do what? To take this action, to go farther. I do not have the ability to do this work on my own. It's against my nature, basically. Now it isn't. It's second nature. But at first it was, and God gives me the ability to do that. So if you're new today, welcome. Thank you for being here. Please keep coming back. Don't stop coming back. Even when the miracle happens, it will happen for you if you do this work honestly and thoroughly. The willingness part is about taking an action here. The honesty part will come when you start when you're honest and thorough about your 4-step, and you sit down with another person, a sponsor preferably, and go through this work. And open-mindedness it's just essential. You can see how the program has to be if I'm going to recover. They're indispensable. I try to live this way every day. I couldn't do that on my own power. That's why for me it's so vital that I stay in the disciplines of 10 and 11, 12.
So here's a good definition of intolerance in this context. An unwillingness to accept views, beliefs, or behavior that differ from one's own. There is a principle, which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. So again, some fancy sort of words and phraseology here. The key part here is contempt prior to investigation. Sam, you have contempt?
Yes, I have contempt as willful disobedience to or open disrespect.
So open disrespect prior to investigation. We know what investigation is, right? The private detective, it's about looking into something. To investigate is to do fact finding, to learn about. So I'm talking to somebody and say, hey man, let me tell you what I know about, my experience and, being a drunk and a drug addict and how I got better. Not interested, right? Contempt prior to investigation. Well, we might have something in common. You might learn something from it. Get lost. Contempt prior to investigation. Do you know that my entire being, my entire personality, my thoughts, my feelings, and my attitudes were constructed solely as one massive practice of contempt prior to investigation until I got better? Anytime there was a cool new band that everybody was into, I hated them before I heard the first note because I had to be different. Contempt prior to investigation, right? I wanted to go to the cool new club. What? I didn't hear about the club first? It's for losers and posers. Contempt prior to investigation. This was the crux of how I approached every single thing in life.
Yeah, even the fact that in Alcoholics Anonymous, when I first got sober, people say, don't go to the district meeting. All there is fighting and battling going on all the time. Okay, so I believe what you tell me, so I'm not going to go. I'm not going to check it out. I already made my mind. I'm not going. I've not even been there yet. I've already decided this. This is ridiculous. When I go, I can actually make a difference in there if I take the learnings that I have of the traditions and the concepts into that meeting and help it to be more productive. So closed-mindedness shuts me off from the power of God in my life, from the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, whatever it is. And please look at the chat because Rob's putting some really good stuff in the chat right now, please, guys.
I did have a little footnote here in my study edition that talks about how that quotation was not actually written by Herbert Spencer. So it says extensive research reveals that in all likelihood, Herbert Spencer never said or wrote this. The quotation seems to have evolved in the course of numerous can't say that word.
Attribution.
Yeah, yes, to an observation written by British theologian William Paley.
Theologian. We're close.
Jump in the chat right now, guys. Rob's got some good stuff
Rob's
in there.
got it. And Howard was nodding enthusiastically as you were reading that, Sam. And if you guys don't know Howard and Kathy put on an amazing study on Sundays at 4 Central.
Yes.
And Howard is like our Mr. Miyagi when it comes to the history, right? So if you love the history, go join their study. Howard, please, before the end of the meeting.
Wax on, wax off.
That's right. Put your flyer in there, right? And Paige is here too. If you guys don't know Paige, I don't know how it's possible, right? Because her podcasts are like all over the planet. This same Zoom ID, the same time of day, but on Mondays, which would be Tuesday if you're, in the UK or further east. Both of these guys, Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, you should be in all of these. If you're new or if you're not new, you just love studying the book and the history. Okay, so let's go back to 27. So awesome detour there into the spiritual experience. And back to 27 as we started off with, right? What Dr. Jung told Roland, hey, you need this vital spiritual experience, and when you have it, your thinking, your feeling, and your reacting is going to be better. So this is how Roland reacted. Bottom paragraph. Upon hearing this, that he needed to have a vital spiritual experience, upon hearing that, our friend Roland was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that, after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in this case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. Man, I cannot tell you guys how many times I've had this exact same thing happen with sponsees. I start talking to them all, oh, well, I'm great. I'm Catholic this, I'm Jewish that, I'm Christian that. Oh yeah, man, I'm in church all the time. And I let them rant for a minute and I say, how'd that work out for you with your drinking? How'd it work out with your drug use? It is wonderful to have religious convictions. God bless. If you were raised a religion or took on religion, you got older and it's important to you, please, I wholeheartedly encourage you to make that an important, ongoing, personal part of your life. However, what Dr. Jung is saying here, that Bill relates in the book to us, is that everything I was doing in my system of faith before produced diddly squat when it came to my drinking and drugging. I need a new approach to my system of faith. I need a new approach to my system of belief in and faith in God so that I can have the vital spiritual experience. And I know not that much about religion, but I know enough to know that I bet I was raised Jewish. I'm not really practicing. I haven't in a long time, but there was a lot of good stuff that I read in the Bible that said, this is how you ought to live a right life to be a good man. I didn't do any of that stuff. Maybe if I'd been really observant, I might have had a vital spiritual experience, but I never gave it a chance because most of the time I just practiced contempt prior to investigation. I did what my mom and dad said. They go to Sunday school, have a bar mitzvah, do this, do that, go to synagogue. It's all contempt prior to investigation, though. I never gave it an opportunity. So this is what happens to many of us. I'm along for the ride. I take the things from the religion I like. I disregard the rest. That is not going to give me a relationship with God. Not going to provide the necessary vital spiritual experience.
Yeah, as David pointed out, so Roland immediately went with, oh, I'm a good church member. I get that thing. No, the doctor clears it up for him. He says, this whole power was destroyed by the doctor telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, doctors tell Roland, I'm not speaking about religion here, guys. We're talking about a vital spiritual experience. This is something that needs to take place. I'm not saying I can't have one of those too, but for me as a real alcoholic drug addict, a full-blown, with all three folds of this illness, and like raising their all three ugly heads, I need to have all those ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which once were the guiding force in my life. How am I doing on my own power with that? How am I doing on my own power with the bedevilments? How am I doing on my powerlessness? How am I doing on my selfishness, my resentments, my fears? Can I remove any of those on my own? I think I need to have a vital spiritual experience, and those things get removed in that order, or because of that, the work out of the 12 Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Top of 28. How are we doing? Okay, we got a few minutes here. Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we've already told you, made him a free man.
So, want to discuss that paragraph?
Or we can just do the next one. I mean, if you have something particular.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'll just fold them together.
Yeah, okay. We, in our turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us. A new life has been given us. Or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. The Bill's appealing to like the thinker or the feeler there. Like the feeling part is a new life has been given to us. Oh my God, right? Like that's hits me in the feels. But if I'm still caught in logic, design for living, a little bit more mechanical sounding, but hey, it works too. Go ahead, Sam.
I did have the definition of dilemma and then flimsy reed. So dilemma is a situation in which a person has to choose between courses of action, methods, etc. So here was the terrible situation in which he had to choose between courses of action and methods, in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which as we have already told you, made him a free man. And then Flimsy Reed, I had the help from the Davids with this one because I had no clue and I couldn't find it on Google or anything. Flimsy is thin, reed is usually a grassy plant. So Jedi David said that it's something insubstantial.
Hmm. So, in my second meeting with my prospect, this is something perhaps I could ask them in that first part of page 28. What was the terrible dilemma that brought you here? I could ask him that question because I want to know all about him right now, right? Second meeting, that's what I'm going to do. Found himself there, this extraordinary, but in which our friend found himself when he had this extraordinary experience, this spiritual awakening. It's extraordinary. Can't be explained. I can't explain it to you. I can just tell you that it happens as a result of. And then it says we, the first 100, in our turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation and drowning man. Do drowning men ever ask questions on what life preserver or which color rope or how you're going to rescue them? They're not in the question mode. They're in like, I need to be saved mode. Whatever you need me to do. Knock me out probably too, because I'm going to be flailing all over the place. What seemed to be a flimsy reed has proved to be a loving and powerful hand of God. Isn't that kind of a lot of people's experiences? Like, although I know you're sober and you have a couple days sober, 10 years, 15, 20, 30 years sober, it seems like I don't see how this is going to work for me. That's a flimsy reed. It's not substantial. But it's proved to be his loving hand. The proof is that as I work these steps, I will get the loving, the powerful hand of God in my life. So this is all about the willingness. This is all about the action that I gotta take place. And then this is the promise here, a new life. This is a promise. Like, guys, knock your socks off. Promise here. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living. Guess what I was doing on my not so good of a design for living on my life. Even in sobriety, I'm not doing that great of a job without the disciplines in my life, without relationship with power. Prefer a design for living. That what? Really works. It absolutely really works. If you want what I have, you have to do what I did. That's what I tell my guys when they ask why. Stop asking why and start asking how.
So just recapping the terrible dilemma that Roland was in, because he got a death sentence from Dr. Jung. Dr. Jung said the fact that you go to church and are involved in it, that ain't going to cut it. You need to have a vital spiritual experience. But the other thing the top paragraph says is, hey, we already told you this guy got better. He had this experience and he's a free man now. How? Because he, just like the rest of us, sought the same escape with the desperation of drowning man. Like David said, such a great analogy. Like, if I'm overboard, man overboard in a storm, do I care if they throw me the yellow life preserver or the red one? I do not care. I say, for the love of all that's holy, please throw me something to save my life. And that's the approach, that level of hopelessness and desperation that I need to take so that I don't get caught up in contempt prior investigation, that I come honest and willing and open-minded. And then guess what happens? I get a whole new life. And what does it mean to have a whole new life? Does it mean that I necessarily get the girl of my dreams or win $1 million or any of these material, insubstantial things that we think about? No. My whole new life is characterized by my reaction to life. Profound alteration of my reaction to life, that I think and I feel and I react differently. And maybe once that happens, I find that the girl I was with was already the girl of my dreams. That maybe the job I was already employed in was already a career where I could make a living. But I couldn't see it before because I was so blinded in the old prejudices.
I had one more thing.
Please.
I think this paragraph just speaks to me so much. We, in our turn, sought the same escape of the desperation and drowning man. I think this paragraph smashes the idea that take your time and work these steps. I just think it says that. Oh, my God. Take your time. Step a year. Oh, honey, when you feel like working the steps. No, I'm a drowning man. You got to get to me now. I don't know which speaker said it, but he goes, he was a lifeguard. And he said, there's a woman out there drowning. He said, you know what? I'll be right to you. I'm going to get a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And I'll
just
be right
tread
back.
water. Tread water for the next 4 or 5 hours. Then I'll throw you the life preserver if you want to grab it.
I think it smashes the idea that we take our time and work these steps. Howard does a wonderful job of the window of opportunity. It closes quickly. We just don't know when it does or what it looks like when it's going to happen.
All right, I'm gonna kill the recording.